A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. So, we have a special one today because this prompt actually came in from Hannah. She's been diving into some cognitive frameworks recently and wanted us to break one down that she's found incredibly useful. Here is what she wrote to us. I was in a women's coaching group for a while where I learned about something they call the model, which I found incredibly helpful for having, as they describe, a managed mind. I do not know if this is a standard life coaching thing or specific to certain coaches, but it essentially goes circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result, where each one causes the next. It is essential to understand that an objective circumstance is categorically different from a thought or feeling. I found this method so helpful at sorting out my life and general well-being, and I tried to find a similar course, not just for women, as I thought Daniel would really find it helpful too, but I never found one. I would love it if you could dive into the model and explain to Daniel and other listeners how to use it to improve their well-being.
I love that Hannah sent this in. It is such a sharp, logical way to look at how we function. And honestly, Corn, just hearing that sequence, circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result, it sounds less like a self-help mantra and more like a technical specification for human software.
It really does. It's like, imagine a debugger for your brain that can actually trace every emotional crash or productivity stall back to a single line of code, which, in this framework, is just a specific thought. We spend so much time trying to fix our results or our actions directly, but if the bug is upstream in the thought line, you're just patching symptoms.
Well, not exactly in the forbidden sense, but you are hitting on the core architecture here. In an era where we are absolutely redlining on information overload, these kinds of cognitive frameworks aren't just nice to have anymore. They are becoming the ultimate productivity hack because they give you a mental operating system to filter the noise. By the way, fun fact for the listeners, today's episode is actually being powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash, which is writing our script and helping us parse through the logic of this model.
It's fitting, right? Using an AI model to discuss a human cognitive model. But let's get into the hook of this. Most people move through the world thinking that their feelings are a direct reaction to what happens to them. Like, my boss was rude, therefore I am frustrated. But Hannah is pointing out that there is a middleman in that transaction that we usually ignore.
The T-line, the thought. That is the pivot point for the entire system. If you think about it in terms of systems engineering, the circumstance is just the raw input data. It is neutral. It has no charge. The thought is the processing layer where the data gets interpreted, and that interpretation is what triggers the physiological response, the feeling.
Which is wild when you stop to consider that we basically walk around with an unsupervised mind most of the day. We let these interpretations run in the background like a leaked memory process that just eats up all our RAM and leaves us wondering why we're exhausted by noon.
It's the ultimate black box problem. We see the input, the circumstance, and we feel the output, the stress or the anger, but we don't look at the code running in between. What Hannah is describing, the CTFAR sequence, is basically a way to open up the terminal and actually see the script that's running.
And once you see the script, you realize you can actually edit it. That's the managed mind part. It's not about pretending things are great when they aren't. It's about recognizing that the greatness or badness isn't in the event itself. It's in the sentence your brain wrote about the event.
I think that's why it's so effective for people who like logic and structure. It turns an emotional crisis into a logic puzzle. Instead of being swallowed by a feeling, you're looking at a diagnostic report. You can say, okay, I have this result in my life right now that I don't like. Let's trace the execution stack back up and see where it started.
It's funny that Hannah mentioned she couldn't find a male-focused version of this, because when you strip away the coaching terminology, it sounds a lot like what the Stoics were talking about 2,000 years ago. Marcus Aurelius was essentially running the model in his journals every night.
He really was. The dichotomy of control is just a different way of saying separate the circumstance from the thought. But the model adds that extra layer of causality showing exactly how that thought leads to the feeling, then the action, and finally the result. It's a complete loop.
So we've got the hook, we've got the framework, and we've got a lot of unsupervised code to debug. Let's actually break down these 5 steps and see how they hold up when we put them under some technical scrutiny.
To really get under the hood, we have to define these 5 lines with surgical precision, because if you miscategorize one, the whole logic of the model breaks down. It starts with the circumstance. In this framework, a circumstance is a neutral fact. It's something that could be proven in a court of law or observed by a silent camera. My bank balance is $500 is a circumstance. I am broke is not.
Right, because broke is a value judgment. To a billionaire, $500 is broke. To someone with 5 cents, it's a windfall. So the circumstance is just the raw data point, completely devoid of adjectives or emotional charge. It's the C line.
And the next step is the T line, the thought. This is the sentence in your head about the circumstance. This is where the human element enters the system. The thought is the interpretation layer. If the circumstance is, it is raining, the thought might be, this is going to ruin my commute. The rain didn't do anything to your commute yet. Your brain just ran a simulation of a negative outcome.
And that simulation triggers the F line, the feeling. This is a one-word descriptor of a physiological state. Anxious, frustrated, calm, energized. The model posits that the rain didn't make you frustrated. The thought that the rain would ruin your day made you frustrated. It's a subtle but massive distinction in ownership.
It shifts the locus of control entirely, because that feeling then drives the A line, the action. If you feel frustrated, maybe you drive aggressively or snap at your coworker. Those actions lead to the R line, the result. And here is the kicker. The result always mirrors the original thought. If your thought was, this day is ruined, your aggressive driving and bad attitude actually finished the job of ruining the day.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a spreadsheet format. You're essentially debugging the causality of your own bad mood. It's structured this way to show that while we can't always change the C line, we can't stop the rain. We have total right access to the T line. If you change the code in the thought, the entire downstream output changes. It's the ultimate if-then logic. If thought equals I am failing, then feeling equals anxiety. If feeling equals anxiety, then action equals procrastination. It's a deterministic chain that once you see it, you can't unsee. It's like looking at the source code of your own bad day.
And that's why this causal chain holds up under scrutiny even if it feels a bit reductive at first. In cognitive science, this mirrors the cognitive appraisal theory. The idea is that our emotions aren't direct reactions to the world, they're reactions to our evaluations of the world. If a boss sends you a terse email at 2 p.m., that just says, see me in my office. That is the neutral circumstance. The words on the screen, the C line.
Right. And if your T line is, I'm getting fired, you're going to have a very different F line than if your thought is, he finally wants to talk about that promotion. Same email, 2 completely different physiological responses. One leads to a panic attack, the other leads to a confident stride down the hallway.
Let's trace that I'm getting fired path because it's a perfect case study in how the model proves itself true. If you think they're angry with me, your feeling is likely anxiety or dread. When you're fueled by dread, what is your A line? Your action might be over-preparing, stuttering, or over-apologizing for things you didn't even do.
Or the classic defensive crouch. You go in there acting like a guilty person before they've even said a word.
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. The result, the R line, ends up being diminished professional standing. You acted like someone who isn't a peer or a leader. So the result, I showed up as someone who is failing, actually mirrors that original thought, I am failing. You created the very evidence you were afraid of.
It's a thought-feeling loop. But what I find interesting is the technical trade-off here. We're essentially treating thoughts like code. The benefit is clarity and debuggability. But the trade-off is that it feels a bit cold? Like you're stripping the humanity out of your experiences by forcing them into these 5 lines. Is there a risk of becoming a bit of a robot if you're constantly categorizing your grief or your joy into T-lines?
That's a valid critique. The model is a tool for management, not necessarily for the full spectrum of the human experience, but for the unsupervised mind, the part of us that stays up at 3 a.m., worrying about a Slack message. Treating those thoughts as optional code is a massive relief. You realize you don't have to believe every sentence your brain generates. You can literally choose to comment out that line of code and replace it with something more functional. It's not about positive thinking, it's about functional thinking.
It's the managed mind Hannah mentioned. You aren't letting the scripts run in the background without a code review. You're actually looking at the output and saying, wait, this action isn't getting me the result I want. Let me trace this back to the feeling, and then back to the thought that started the whole process.
It's the ultimate code review for your own consciousness. And what's fascinating is that this isn't just a psychological trick, it actually leverages neuroplasticity. When you consistently use a framework like the model to interrupt those automated thought-feeling loops, you're physically rewiring your brain. A 2023 meta-analysis in Nature Neuroscience showed that deliberate cognitive reframing, basically what we're doing on the T-line, strengthens the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Over 8 weeks, you're essentially installing a higher latency buffer that allows you to choose a response rather than just reacting.
So it's like upgrading from a legacy BIOS to a modern UEFI. You get more control before the OS even boots. But let's take this into a high-stakes environment. Imagine a senior dev during a massive production outage. The C-line is, database latency is at 5,000 milliseconds, and the checkout service is down. If their T-line is, I'm going to get fired for this, or everyone thinks I'm incompetent, the F-line is pure panic.
Right, and panic is a terrible fuel for debugging. The A-line for a panicked engineer is usually shotgun debugging, changing random variables, missing logs, or fat-fingering commands because their hands are literally shaking. The R-line. The outage lasts longer and they likely introduce new bugs. The result perfectly mirrors the thought, I am incompetent, because they acted incompetently.
But if they apply the model in real time,
Then they pivot the T-line to something neutral and functional. This is a logic puzzle I have the tools to solve. The feeling shifts from panic to focused curiosity. The action becomes methodical. Check the locks, check the recent deployments, isolate the container. The result is a faster resolution, which proves the thought that they are, in fact, capable of solving it.
it's interesting how this overlaps with Stoicism, but it feels more directional. I mean, Marcus Aurelius was big on the dichotomy of control, knowing what's yours and what isn't. But the model feels like it's providing the actual wiring diagram for how to exert that control.
That's a great distinction. Stoicism tells you don't let external things disturb you, which is the goal. The model is the how-to manual. It's also a streamlined version of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. While CBT might spend a lot of time on downward arrowing or identifying specific cognitive distortions like catastrophizing, the model just puts it all in one linear chain of causality. It's a minimum viable product for mental health. You don't need a doctorate to see that your result line is a direct output of your thought line.
It's the math of emotions. If the math isn't checking out, you don't just keep running the same equation and hoping for a different sum. You go back and change the variables.
Well, you've identified the core mechanic. It's about taking that unsupervised mind and putting it on a leash. Whether you're leading a team or just trying to get through a stressful Tuesday, seeing the T-line as a variable rather than a literal truth is the closest thing to a superpower I've found.
So if we're treating this like a system we can actually debug, we need some telemetry. You can't fix a race condition if you aren't logging the events. I think the first move for anyone listening, Daniel included, is what I'd call a thought audit. Just pick one circumstance every day. Something neutral, like my pull request got 5 comments, or the gym was closed. Write that on the C-line, then force yourself to trace the rest of the chain all the way down to the result.
That's the key. You have to see it on paper because your brain is too fast to catch it in real time at first. When you write down, the gym was closed as the circumstance, and then your thought is, Well, there goes my entire fitness routine. I might as well eat a pizza. You see the absurdity. The feeling is defeated. The action is ordering a large pepperoni, and the result is I'm further from my fitness goals. The result literally proves the thought that your routine is gone.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a spreadsheet. But once you've logged a few of those, you start to develop a circuit breaker. That's the second big takeaway. When you're in the middle of a day and you feel that spike of, say, resentment or inadequacy, you stop. You don't try to stop the feeling. That's already in the pipes. You go upstream to the T-line and label the thought objectively. You say, I am having the thought that I'm behind schedule.
Labeling it is huge. It creates distance. It's the difference between being inside the storm and watching the storm from a window. If you can label the thought as just a sentence in your head, you realize it's a variable you can swap out.
So for anyone wanting to test this out, start a model journal. It doesn't have to be fancy, just a digital scratch pad or a notebook where you separate the objective facts from your subjective layers. If you can't prove it in a court of law, it doesn't go on the C-line. My wife was short with me is a thought. My wife said 3 words when I walked in is a circumstance. Identifying that gap is where the magic happens.
It really is. It turns your internal life from a chaotic black box into a predictable, manageable piece of software. You start to see that you aren't a victim of your feelings, you're just the lead developer of the code that creates them.
It's the ultimate refactor. And honestly, once you start seeing the world through the CT-FAR lens, you can't really unsee it. You start spotting other people's models in real time, which is a dangerous game. But it definitely builds some empathy when you realize everyone is just running their own unsupervised code.
It really does. And looking ahead, I think we're going to see these kinds of cognitive frameworks become even more integrated into our daily tech stack. We're already seeing the early stages of AI-assisted mental health tools, and imagine a system powered by something like Google Gemini 3 Flash, which, by the way, is the model behind our script today, that acts as a real-time debugger. You could vent into a voice memo about a stressful day, and the AI could instantly parse it into a model, separating the objective circumstances from the subjective thoughts that are driving your stress.
Warning, high latency thought detected on line 2. Would you like to refactor? I'm a failure too. I missed one deadline. I can see the push notifications now. But until we have a neural link doing that for us, the manual work is where the growth is. So, here is the challenge for everyone listening this week, and especially for Daniel. Pick one circumstance. Just one. Maybe it's a red light, a blunt Slack message, or a broken piece of equipment. Write it down. Strip away every adjective until it's a cold, hard fact. Then, trace the chain. What is the one sentence thought you're attaching to it? And what result is that thought creating in your life?
It's a small practice, but the ROI is massive. Big thanks to Hannah for sending this in. It's a framework that deserves a lot more attention in the technical world. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a huge shout out to Modal for providing the GPU credits that make this whole operation possible. If you found this helpful, jump over to our Telegram channel. Just search for My Weird Prompts to get notified when we drop the next one.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We'll see you in the next episode.
Keep your mind managed. Catch you later. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash. Text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weird.